Hare Krishna. I am Radhika Pyari Devidasi, and this is the continuation of the Mahabharat series retold by Krishna Dharma Prabhu. Chapter 10 Draupadi Swayamvara. After a few days' journey, the forest paths brought the Pandavas and Dhaumya onto the road leading to Panchala. As they made their way along that broad stone highway, they met a group of Brahmins. The Brahmins asked, "Who are you, and where are you going?" Yudhishthira replied that they were the 5 brahmacharis, celibate students, who had come from Ekachakra along with their teacher. The Brahmins then exhorted the brothers to attend Draupadi Swayamvara. "Accompany us, we are going straight there. The magnanimous King Drupad will be distributing vast wealth to the Brahmins on his divine daughter's behalf." Again the Pandavas heard of the extraordinary birth and beauty of Draupadi, as well as details of her impending Swayamvara. All of Kampilya would be celebrating. There would be actors, singers, dancers, and expert reciters of the ancient Vedic histories. Powerful wrestlers would compete and athletes would give wonderful displays. Food and drink of the best quality would be served in abundance. And at the end of the celebration, Draupadi would then select a husband from among the kings and princes who had been assembling from all parts of the world. The Brahmins told the Pandavas that they had heard that Drupad had set a most difficult task for the man who would win his daughter's hand. The kings who were coming to compete would also be distributing much charity to the Brahmins in hopes of invoking auspiciousness for themselves and obtaining victory at the Swayamvara. The Brahmins laughed as they spoke. They pointed to the simple cloth the Pandavas were wearing. "It seems you boys could use some new cloth. Follow us. Having received all that you require, you may return with us or go wherever you will." Inviting the 5 brothers to travel with them, the Brahmins continued, "Who knows, the princess may even select one of you boys, all as handsome as the celestials." They pointed to Bhima. "This godlike youth has a body like a thunderbolt. Surely he will win much wealth if he enters the wrestling competitions." Yudhishthira smiled. "We shall all accompany you to Kampilya. Pray lead the way." The party proceeded. They travelled by day and at night stopped in roadside, woods or on lake shores. With their gentle speech and amiable behavior, the Pandavas endeared themselves to whomever they met, but no one recognized them. As they reached the outskirts of the city, they came to a small village. Walking from house to house to find accommodations, they were soon admitted by a potter and his family. The brothers settled there and lived by begging, just as they had done in Ekachakra. They learned from the villagers that the Swayamvara was to take place in a few days. The king had set a stiff test for winning Draupadi. A small target had been placed on top of a tall pole. Beneath it was a rotating plate with one small hole in it. An arrow had to be shot through that hole at the moment it was aligned with the target. The king had also determined that a particular bow should be used, one which an ordinary man could barely lift. Only an extraordinary warrior would be able to pass the test and win the divine Draupadi's hand. Arjuna was enlivened. He prayed to Krishna that he might have the chance to try for the princess. From Vyasdev's words, it seemed that she was destined to be the wife of one of them. And by such a union, the brothers would gain the friendship and alliance of the powerful Drupad. That would probably prove useful in the future. Arjuna eagerly awaited the Swayamvara. Drupad had made lavish preparations for the ceremony. A huge stadium had been constructed. In its massive sandstone walls were 100 gates, each one inlaid with gold and precious gems. Each gate was wide enough to admit crowds passing through. Within the stadium were gently sloping terraces made of coral and lapis lazuli. At the front of their terraces were hundreds of jewel-encrusted thrones arranged for the many monarchs in attendance. All around the stadium, the king had built white mansions for their residents. The buildings were many-storied and looked like the cloud-kissing peaks of Mountain Kailash. The windows of those mansions were covered with gold lattices and walls studded with diamonds and emeralds. Costly rugs were spread on their marble floors. When the day of the Swayamvara arrived, the kings were invited into the stadium. They came through the northern gate and took their seats on the golden thrones. As the monarchs entered, thousands of trumpets blared and kettle drums resounded throughout the stadium. Many rishis, all of them shining like the sun, entered through the eastern gate. The terraces adorned with countless wreaths and garlands were filled with Panchala's citizens. As they flooded into the stadium, the colorfully dressed people made a sound like the roar of the ocean. The scent of black aloe and frankincense wafted throughout the stadium as everyone settled into their places. The Pandavas entered with the Brahmins and took their place in their midst, unnoticed by anyone. They looked around the arena. At the head of all the assembled kings sat Duryodhana and his brothers, resembling a blazing planet surrounded by 100 bright stars. Bhima felt his anger rising, but Yudhishthira checked him with a glance. They could not risk being discovered yet. The ceremony had begun. Actors and dancers were entertaining the crowd. Brahmins were performing fire sacrifices. Drupad was distributing charity. All of this continued for 15 days, and with each day the attendance swelled. The Pandavas were astonished to see Drupad's affluence. The Panchala king was distributing heaps of golds and gems to the Brahmins. Although dressed as Brahmins, the Pandavas did not go forward to collect charity, but remained in their places, awaiting the day when Draupadi would appear. On the 16th day, the princess, dressed in robes of shining yellow silk and adorned with brilliant ornaments, entered the arena. In her hands, she held a golden dish containing the nuptial garland, which she would place around the neck of the man who successfully passed the test her father had set. Gentle music from the flute, tabor, and veena played as Draupadi walked towards her seat next to her father. Seeing her beauty, the kings and princes suddenly stood up and brandished their weapons. They boasted to one another in loud voices, "I shall win this princess. No one can equal my strength and prowess. Draupadi will be mine." That host of princes seemed like an agitated ocean as they rose and boasted of their power. Afflicted by the god of love and staring at one another in jealousy, they slapped their arms and held aloft their bows and swords, looking like so many Himalayan elephants maddened by desire while in rut. The celestial chariots of the gods, led by the guardians of the four quarters of the universe, Yamraja, Indra, Kuvera, and Vayu, settled above the arena. Siddhas, Charanas, Nagas, Rudras, Daityas, Danavas, and Guhakas assembled in the canopy of the sky, curious to witness Drupad's sacrifice and the selection of Draupadi's husband. The great rishi, headed by Narada, Angira, Parvatya, stood in the sky among the gods, appearing like suns. When the 5 Pandava brothers saw Draupadi's dark and lovely face, they felt their hearts pierced as if by darts. They stood up from their seats and gazed at her exquisite form as she moved gracefully to her father's side. On the opposite side of the arena were the Yadavas from Mathura. Sitting in their midst, Krishna noticed the Pandavas stand. He looked closely at the 5 brothers and turning to Balram said, "In my opinion, those 5 men over there are the Pandavas." Krishna indicated the brothers with a slight nod of his head. "I heard a rumor that my cousin survived in the fire in Varnavata. This now seems true. What is your opinion, Rama?" Balrama carefully observed each of the 5 brothers. There was no doubt. They were Kunti's sons. He turned and smiled at Krishna, who returned his smile, but they remained silent about their discovery. By now, all the princes were gazing only at Draupadi and her father. None of them noticed the Pandavas in their midst. Drupad waved to them, and biting their lips in anger and envy towards one another, they sat down. As celestial flowers fell from the sky, the sound of countless conches and kettle drums filled the stadium. Draupadi's brother Drishtadyumna stood up like a golden flagstaff raised in honor of Indra. The stadium fell silent as he announced the names of all the kings and princes present. He first named the princes from Hastinapura, then those from Mathura, then all those attending from hundreds of other countries and provinces. Drishtadyumna held his sister's arm and said in a voice that rumbled like thunder, "This princess will be won today by the one who can hit the mark." The prince pointed to the huge bow lying on a golden table. "There is the bow and the arrows you must use. Truly do I say that whoever shoots an arrow through the device and into the target will win Draupadi's hand. Only one of the noble birth and great prowess will be capable of this feat." Drishtadyumna sat down near his father. Drupad instructed his priest to kindle the sacrificial fire for the Swayamvara ceremony. The sounds of thousands of Brahmins reciting Vedic prayers filled the arena. The king looked around at the assembled princes. He was not impressed. None of these proud monarchs looked like a suitable match for his daughter. The king thought of Arjuna. If only that prince were still alive. He had heard a rumor that the Pandavas had escaped the fire, but where were they now? This test could only be passed by someone of Arjuna's ability. Drupad had deliberately devised a test that only Arjuna could pass in hopes that the Pandavas might appear. Yaja had promised him he would obtain a daughter from his sacrifice who would become Arjuna's wife. How could the Rishi's words prove false? Drupad looked on anxiously as each king and prince was called to try the test. With their crowns and golden earrings glinting in the warm sunshine, the kings and princes strode up one by one to the bow. It was only with considerable effort that they were able to even lift the massive weapon from the table. Having somehow managed that and finally getting it upright, they then had to bend and string it. These kings could not manage the task even in their imaginations. The bow would bend slightly, then spring back with great force. The princes were thrown to the ground, their bodies bruised, and their crowns and garlands scattered. As they each took their turn and were in turn humiliated, they returned to their fine golden thrones, straightening their shining ornaments as they walked. Panting for breath, their romantic ardor dispelled, the princes sat silently, shaking their heads. Karna's turn came. Seeing him march towards the bow like a golden mountain entering the arena, the Pandavas considered that the target had been struck and the princess won. As he approached the bow, however, Draupadi stood up and said in a loud voice, "I shall not accept a charioteer's son as my husband." Knowing that Karna was the son of Adhiratha, leader of the Sutas, who generally acted as chariot drivers, Draupadi exercised her prerogative and denied him the opportunity to attempt the test. Karna blushed deeply and laughed in vexation. Glancing at the sun, he turned and strode back to his seat. He ground his teeth and wrung his hands in anger, but said nothing. The powerful king of the Chedis, Shishupal, was next. With great effort, he bent the bow in a semicircle, then lost his grip as he tried to string it. He was thrown onto his back and lay there exhausted for several moments before returning to his seat, defeated. Then Jarasandha, lord of the Magadha country and scourge even of the gods, took his turn. He bent the bow and held it in one hand while trying to string it with the other. Again the bow resisted and he was thrown to his knees. Sneering at the other monarch's weakness, Duryodhana strode up. A silence fell upon the assembly as the king of Hastinapura bowed to Drupad. The king nodded slightly and Duryodhana lifted the bow. He strung it deftly and placed on its string one of the golden shafted arrows. Taking careful aim, he loosed the arrow. It sped upwards and passed cleanly through the rotating hole but missed the target by a hair's breadth. The prince angrily threw down the bow and returned to his seat. Knowing that it was Draupadi's destiny to marry Arjuna, none of the Yadava kings, including Krishna and Rama, attempted the test. They simply watched and laughed as the bow hurled each of the princes to the ground. They breathed a sigh of relief when Duryodhana's arrow whistled past the target. That wicked man did not deserve a prize like Draupadi. But where was Arjuna? Only Krishna and Balram felt no apprehension. They looked across at the Brahmin's compound. Now all the kings had tried and failed. Draupadi was still holding the bright red garland on its golden dish. Drishtadumna called for any last contestants. Arjuna looked at Dhaumya, who smiled and nodded. The prince stood up and walked into the center of the arena. The assembled Brahmins roared in joy and waved their deerskins. Maybe a simple Brahmin would succeed where even the proud, mighty kings of the earth could not. And if any Brahmin could succeed, it would be this one. Arjuna looked like a dark cloud as he advanced towards the bow. He moved like a lion. Not all the Brahmins agreed. Some of the elder Brahmins were doubtful. Fearing that Arjuna would humiliate the Brahmin class by his rash act, they spoke out loudly. How can one untrained in arms and lacking strength succeed where even the lords of this world have failed? Stop that youth. It is merely out of childish impetuosity or vanity that he is attempting this impossible task. We shall all be made to look ridiculous. Other Brahmins demurred. Just look more closely at this boy. His arms and thighs resemble the trunks of mighty elephants. His shoulders are broad and he appears as powerful as a maddened lion. He may well succeed. Surely he would not have gone forward if he lacked energy and power. Some of them describe the power of Brahmins. Whether possessed of physical strength or not, Brahmins were always powerful by virtue of their spiritual strength. No Brahmin should ever be disregarded. Once all the earth's warriors had been annihilated by Parshuram, who was a Brahmin. The great Rishi Agastya had drank the entire ocean. There was nothing a Brahmin could not achieve. This youth should not be checked. Yes, let him go forward. He will easily string the bow and strike down the target. The elders replied, So be it, and again took their seats. Arjuna reached the center of the arena and after bowing to the king, spoke in a voice that echoed around the stadium. Is it permissible for a Brahmin to attempt this test? Drupad looked curiously at the Brahmin, then gave his assent. It is never disgraceful for rulers to be subordinated by the power of Brahmins. The king replied, Indeed, they are protected by that power even as Vishnu protects the gods. Arjuna turned to the bow and folding his palms, bowed low before it. Within his mind he prayed to Krishna. Having walked respectfully around the bow 3 times, he took it up in his right hand. In moments he had strung it and placed a golden arrow on the string. A complete hush fell over the stadium as Arjuna stood absolutely still with the bow drawn to it full circle. He knelt and aimed upward at the target. Suddenly he released the arrow and it shot up with blinding speed. Passing cleanly through the hole, it struck the target in its center. As the target clattered to the ground with the arrow sticking from it, the stadium erupted. The people rose to their feet and cheered, while musicians played innumerable instruments. Drums, trumpets, and conches resounded and bards immediately composed poems glorifying Arjuna's achievement. The gods praised Arjuna and sent down showers of celestial flowers. The Brahmins rose in a body, waving their garments and water pots and leaping about in joy. But the kings and princes were seized with shame, and they uttered exclamations of grief and despair. Drupad, his eyes expanded in happiness, gazed in wonder as the mysterious Brahmin walked toward the royal dais. Who was he? Could it actually be Arjuna? The king noticed the other monarchs becoming agitated. There was clearly going to be a fight. Drupad turned to his chief minister and commanded that his army stand ready. He then told Draupadi to accept the Brahmin as her husband. The princess looked at Arjuna as he approached the dais. She was immediately attracted by this godlike youth with the gentle demeanor. Maybe he was Arjuna, as Yaja had promised. Even if he were not, there was certainly no shame in marrying him. He was a Brahmin, and Brahmins were always considered superior to the ruling class, or Kshatriyas. And although he appeared to be a Brahmin, he was especially powerful and obviously self-controlled. This union was surely sanctified by the presence of Krishna, the all-powerful Lord of the creation. Draupadi approached Kunti's son and joyfully placed the garland around his neck. Seeing Draupadi actually accept the Brahmin further infuriated the kings. Yudhishthira decided it was time to leave. He rose up with his brothers and walked towards the stadium gates. Arjuna followed behind with Draupadi. The Brahmins cheered and praised him as he walked past. From amid the enraged kings, Duryodhana called out, "How does this Drupad dare offend us in this way? He has passed over all the lords of the earth to bestow his daughter upon a poor and unqualified Brahmin? Brahmins should never be allowed to compete in a Swayamvara, which is meant only for the royal order. It seems Drupad invited us here only to insult us." The kings roared in agreement. Some of them waved their weapons. Shishupal then said, "The Panchala king is so proud that he thinks none of us is his equal. He deserves to be punished at once. Let us act so that the other Swayamvaras do not end in a similar way." The kings stood up with their weapons at the ready. They glared at Drupad and moved in a body towards him. Seeing the overwhelming odds, Drupad backed away in fear. Yudhishthira was observing the scene from the gate. Realizing that Drupad, now his father-in-law, was in danger, he ordered Bhima and Arjuna to assist him. The brothers quickly ran up to the dais and placed themselves between Drupad and the other kings. Arjuna still held the sacrificial bow. Bhima tore up a tree from the side of the arena and brandished it menacingly. The two princes looked like Indra and Yamraj standing against the massed force of Daityas and Danavas. The hundreds of kings stood back warily as they looked at the two heroes facing them. Krishna remained unmoved. Watching the two Pandavas preparing to fight, he turned to Balram and said quietly, "Any doubts there may have been about the identity of this princess should now be gone. None but Bhima could have torn up that sal tree, and who but Arjuna could have struck down the target? O Sankarshana, these are surely the Pandavas." Balram looked at Bhima and Arjuna as they prepared to ward off the maddened kings. "This is certainly true," he smiled. "It is fortunate indeed that our aunt and her young sons have escaped the fire in Varnavata." Many Brahmins ran forward to support the two Pandavas. They waved their water pots and deer skins, crying out, "Fear not, we shall fight these arrogant monarchs." Arjuna smiled and gently restrained them. "Stand aside and watch," he said. "With my sharp arrows I shall stop them, just as so many snakes are checked by the power of mantras." Karna advanced to the head of the kings. He shouted, "Although the royal order should not attack Brahmins, it is permissible, if those Brahmins stand ready for battle." Karna stopped at a distance from Arjuna and shot arrows at him. Arjuna, who was supplied with a large number of shafts by Drupad's soldiers, immediately countered all the Karna's arrows with his own. King Salya of Madras fought with Bhima, and they appeared like two huge elephants colliding together. Duryodhana and the other kings contended lightly with the other Brahmins who still challenged them. They easily held off the ascetic sages, but did not injure them. Arjuna sent a number of swift arrows at Karna. They pierced his limbs and stunned him with their force. Karna looked upon his opponent with surprise. He had not expected such dexterity and martial power. Guarding himself more carefully, he replied with hundreds of straight flying shafts, but Arjuna again knocked down all his arrows before they reached him. Seeing his expertise, the other kings cheered him on. This infuriated Karna. He released thousands of arrows. They filled the air like a flock of golden birds. Still Arjuna countered them, invoking celestial weapons and creating a mass of arrows that sped towards Karna. The two combatants fought with astonishing skill. As they battled, they called out to one another in the language of heroes. Behold the strength of my arms. Guard yourself if you can. See how I counter your moves. Stand ready, for I shall release even more deadly weapons. The other kings stood by and watched open-mouthed, praising both warriors as they displayed their skill. Karna soon realized he was not to gain the upper hand in the fight. So he stopped his attack and addressed Arjuna in a loud voice. O best of Brahmins, I am pleased with your prowess. Are you the science of arms personified? Perhaps you are Parshuram or Indra, or maybe even the infallible Lord Vishnu. When I am angered, there are none who can fight with me, but these personalities or the son of Kunti, Arjuna. Arjuna smiled. I am neither Indra nor Parshurama, nor am I any god or divine being. Know me to be a simple Brahmin who has become proficient in arms by his Guru's grace. Having mastered both earthly and celestial weapons, I stand here ready to vanquish you in battle. Karna lowered his weapons and became pensive. This was no ordinary Brahmin. It would be better to desist from the fight. A Brahmin's spiritual power was always greater than a Kshatriya's martial power. The great king Vishwamitra, even though well versed in every divine weapon, could not overpower Vashishta Rishi, and the Brahmin Parshuram single-handedly defeated all the kings of the earth. Karna bowed to the mysterious Brahmin and turned away from the battle. Elsewhere, Bhima and Salya were still engaged in a fierce hand-to-hand combat. Locked together, they stamped and rolled about the arena like a pair of maddened elephants fighting for supremacy. Their roars and the sound of their blows filled the stadium, sometimes pushing, sometimes dragging, and sometimes throwing the other down. They fought with unflagging energy. They struck each other with the force of thunderbolts, laughing loudly as they fought. Suddenly, Bhima lifted Salya high above his head and whirled him round. He threw the king to a distance and left him lying stunned. Remembering him to be the brother of Madri, Bhima did not continue his attack upon Salya. The kings were amazed to see both Karna and Salya matched by the two Brahmins. They looked in awe upon Bhima and Arjuna, who stood together ready for further assaults. Surely these two are not Brahmins. Who could fight with Karna except Drona or Arjuna? Who could throw down Salya other than the mighty Balram or Bhima? None could face Duryodhana except the unconquerable Krishna. Let us establish their lineage before we continue. The other kings agreed. It was not wise to fight with Brahmins, even if they were offensive. But if these two proved to belong to another class, then the fight could continue with full force. Seeing the kings hesitating, Krishna came forward and spoke to them. O monarchs, the maiden has been fairly and wonderfully won by the Brahmin. There is no need for further fighting. Let us not blight this sacred occasion by unnecessary bloodshed, especially by assaulting the Brahmins. With gentle words and arguments, Krishna succeeded in dissuading the kings from further aggression. Gradually they put away their weapons and left the arena. As they went out, they talked together in amazement, wondering who the two mighty-armed Brahmins might be. Thus ends the 10th chapter of the Mahabharata series, Draupadi's Swayamvara. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.